All right, my name is Todd Pryor. I'm the town manager for the town of Superior.
My name is Vicki Pesey, and I run the Resolution Copper project.
My name is Tim Bailey, and I'm a hydrogeological consultant with Montgomery and Associates, and I've supported Resolution Copper throughout their studies.
All right, the town of Superior was formed about 120 years ago. The town was a support town for the old mining town of Pinal. It's had mining here for over the last century, and there are significant historic mine impacts to our ecosystem, to our water, and to our creek. In 1998 or so, BHP had purchased the Magma mine and mothballed it, closed it down, and all economic activity pretty much stopped in the town. The population since then is cut in half, so it was a significant economic change for the community. And the town fathers at the time looked at what assets we had that we could make something out of to improve our community. And they looked at our natural beauty and at the creek through town and decided they needed to build a plan around restoring that. Restoring the creek, building pipelines to bring the water back to flow through the community, to build a lake in the center of town, more like a pond in the center of town, to do some aquifer recharge locally. That they started building out the first pipeline in 1998 or in around 2000. 9/11 happened, and all of their funding was pulled. And so that project stopped and sat on a shelf for the next 20 years. When I came on board, I was going through the old studies that sat on a shelf, covered in dust, and I pulled that one out and saw that it's something we could actually do ourselves. And we started working to address that issue. So what did we have to do to restore the project? We started meeting with Resolution to discuss the issue. We put together a water working stakeholder group of just the water stakeholders and discussing it and trying to come up with a plan to do restoration based on today's rules. A lot of the things that have been envisioned in 1998 aren't practically doable anymore. The law has moved on. So we had to come up with basically pull that from that old study, a bunch of projects we could actually build and bootstrap ourselves. And we began doing that. We've got some grants to build trails. We've been working to build restoration pipelines. Part of the way we were able to accomplish that, as part of the water stakeholder group, is Resolution provided Montgomery and Associates very early to give us technical advice. A lot of the projects that are part of our current restoration came from those early meetings and from Tim and from the Montgomery Associates team telling us technically what was feasible. And then Resolution, as a part of our mitigation agreements, paid for a consultant, a facilitator, through, I always get this wrong, U of A Water Resources Research Center. There we go. Ashley Hundlinger originally came on board, and we've had a few different consultants since. One of our key takeaways from this entire process is dealing with these complex issues having to do with permitting a huge mine and requires a lot of technical knowledge. It's just on the water issue, there are gigabits of data to inform it. And parsing that information, figuring out what projects you can actually build, figuring out what the law is around it, how to permit it, it's a quagmire. And very quickly you would sink. So, Water Resources Research Center, and I'm going to try to put that in my mind now, right? So I can get it right. They've done great work facilitating the conversation, bringing stakeholders in, bringing Arizona Water Resources in, bringing ADEQ in, so we can talk about these issues and figure out the regulatory framework and how to restore our creek. And in the meantime, the EIS came out. EIS listed some more water impacts for historic and future mining that will affect Queen Creek. We sat down as a group. We negotiated mitigation agreements. To say that was easy, it would be massively overstated. It took several years to get to agreement on water. Whiskey's for drinking, water's for fighting. And we had some pretty strident conversations, but we did get to agreement. We have worked out mitigation agreements around all of the impacts for mining of the future, all the water impacts, as well as socioeconomic, as well as light, night light, and we're talking traffic impacts. There's a suite of about 13 items that are addressed in our mitigation agreement. Water is about a third of those. Water is the biggest issue by far. It's the most difficult to get through because even if we can all agree you got to fix it, you got to figure out how to do that and what's the law around it and what resources are available. It's not like we can all build a factory and start producing water out back. It has to come from somewhere. So how do we get the water? And all these technical issues are what this stakeholder committee have focused on, trying to bring it together. The latest development as a part of our good neighbor, our mitigation agreements, we agreed to produce a good neighbor agreement. The good neighbor agreement, the core principle of a good neighbor agreement is that you want to be able to sit in a room and discuss the issues without the lawyers. And I know I'm talking to lawyers, so but that is it's a key conversation. Our mayor likes to say a lot that when you bring your lawyers to a negotiation, it's like bringing your mother-in-law to date night. Hopefully, relationships are good enough that you don't have to litigate them. So building relationships, setting up the structures to do that is what we need the lawyers for. You can't build a good neighbor agreement without a lawyer to write it. But once the agreement's in place, if it's well written, we don't need lawyers to maintain it. We don't need to sue each other to maintain our relationship. So that's the principle of a good neighbor agreement. And I've yammered for a long time.
You know, Todd, I've been thinking a lot about what you've been saying, and I think for so long we were so focused on future impacts associated with something that would be a long time into the future, forgot about that there's 100 years of mining legacy here, and so I think that sometimes we were focused on something in the future. You guys were talking about something in the past, and really want to look at something holistically. And I think that's ultimately where we got to. But there's lots of, there's the things that we do today. We have we have a reclamation site, but community monitoring, and that's really important to build trust, but also build capacity on within the community to know and understand the laws that you talked about, to know and understand the framework, and that they're going to monitor our activities with respect to water, surface water, groundwater, and then we're going to talk about those trust, transparency. That went a long way to help facilitate this broader discussion about there were impacts from 100 years of mining, and it really caused us to ask ourselves, what is the right thing to do? It's not what's the legal thing to do always, but just what is the right thing to do. Most of our employees, and you know this, live in the local area and are born and raised in Superior, and impacts to Queen Creek that maybe happened 100 years ago, even though none of us were here, it's important for us to restore that. Queen Creek is this focal point, the centroid of Superior. It brings a sense of place. There's trees, there's shade, there's nature, and it's important to our employees and our communities. So I think, and yet being, I think that we're not the experts in hydrology, surface or groundwater, and bringing in somebody that really knows and understands the ecosystems. And it wasn't just about replacing water. It was doing it in a way that it was sustainable and in a way that the community demanded of us. So that's really where Montgomery & Associates came in to, hopefully you felt like you had the full range to just do the science, collect the data, think deeply about the right way to address historic impacts, future impacts, and then enhance this sort of natural area that actually just goes beyond just the creek bed itself, but looks at a much broader area that it is all interconnected in this entirety of the Superior Basin.
Yeah, so when Resolution hired us and brought us to the table, we of course had been studying the Resolution project and its impacts for nearly 20 years at that point as a firm. But they brought us to the table with the town of Superior and really trusted us completely in interacting with the town and um, collecting data, doing science to understand the issue. And then when the water agreement kind of was conceived of, the mine came to us and said, can you do a study to figure out how we can get some water back to the creek? And so we went away with our team and we looked at, I believe, over 20 options over a period of a year and a half, and had meetings with Resolution's team to look at those options and do trade-off studies. Um, and for me, a big moment was when we came to Vicky, back to Resolution. We had this suite of options, and we brought three things to the forefront. One was restoring water to put it back into the creek, and that was really intended to be sustainable. So that the idea there was that we would restore some abandoned infrastructure in Queen Creek that captures water near the top of the area that we're losing that water, and then move it in a pipeline across the area where it would be flowing down to the mine workings and discharge it back into the creek so that it'll again flow through town. So that was one way that we could get a portion of water back to the creek. Another way was that we knew we had some clean, fresh water flowing into the mine workings that we could pump out of the mine and put into the creek. And so with those two, we expect to be able to get about 100 acre-feet of water a year flowing through the creek. We also brought to the table the idea of long-term storage credits as a way to provide water to assure that the town has drinking water and the town can grow with the mine as the mine comes in. And there's a variety of ways we looked at getting long-term storage credits, but that was one key idea. And then a third thing that was really important to us as scientists was that we're doing something that lasts beyond the life of the mine, that this isn't a Band-Aid solution, but that it's a long-term solution. So we proposed to Vicky that we look at providing an endowment for watershed management for the basin, the Superior Basin, the basin that the town of Superior is in, for the long term. And what we've come up with is effectively a $5 million endowment that will pay out a portion of that every year to support a dedicated watershed manager who can then collaborate with the town to go after grants to put in place systems to restore the watershed. And this is actually a topic that there's been a lot of attention on in Arizona in recent years, with a lot of the work that Laura Norman's been doing out of the USGS. There's a group called Cuenca de los Ojos down near the New Mexico border that has built a lot of rock detention structures, or what they called small rock dams that slow the flow of water off of the watershed and enhance groundwater recharge and enhance growth of vegetation and ecosystem function, sediment retention, lots of good co-benefits to this. And so our thought was that if we could provide something like this to the town, that it would outlive the mine, that the impact when the mine is gone, that hopefully this endowment is still continuing and able to ensure that the watershed and the people here and the water that they count on and the ecosystems here is still there. So bringing those to Vicky was really a powerful moment to me. I was expecting to hear, well, all right, let's do option one. But Vicky said, let's do all three. It's the right thing to do. We need to do what's right for this town. And to me, that was a paradigm shift in the dynamic between the town and the mine to say, we don't want to just do enough to get by. We want to try to do the right thing and make sure that we're caring for this community for the long run.
But something that you mentioned, and Todd, you mentioned earlier, that think of it sort of on a larger holistic scale of a watershed restoration. Some of the old studies way back when, it may be that the specifics of what they wanted are not doable because of regulation, but the outcome would have been the same, right? So this larger scale watershed restoration goes back to sort of the dreams and the aspirations of the early people in the town from a number of years ago, as well as people that still live here today that want to see something on a grander scale. And that's the smart, science-based approach that really goes back to what the early days of the old, the previous town manager and the mayor had really envisioned for the town.
They had also seen during their lifetime some of the direct impacts, because they had Things don't happen overnight. So the creek had been slowly drying up for generations. The fracture impacts, the pumping impacts were there, and they were building up. When some key incidents happened, like the Never Sweat Tunnel was put in the 50s, 60s, and the highway project going through in the 50s, there were big swings in the actual health of the creek. Now it flows maybe 2 weeks a year and dries up for the rest of the time. So we've completely inverted the pattern. And we can see why, but these are big system impacts. They're not, you can't go back in time and fix the fractures in the creek, right? A lot of them are naturally occurring. It's not that, somebody went in and blasted it so much it's all fractured. It's naturally porous rock, and then we've put a straw at the bottom and we're sucking on it. So that means that there's less water. There's no surface water interactions between all those perched aquifers. There's no water coming out of that shallow ground or the deep groundwater systems. There's none of the groundwater systems that recharge that creek function anymore. So how do we replace that? And if you think that's an easy thing to decide, it's not. Tim brought one really good idea of restoring an old infiltration gallery and piping that past the fracture zone. But that still doesn't get us to the baseline. So there's more work that we're going to be doing to get that done. More permitting we'll have to do to get it done. This is probably the work of a generation to get our creek back where we want it. But if we set up an endowment and there's available water to put into this project, then we can get it done. Maybe not in my lifetime, but maybe in the next one. But it all starts with everybody sitting down and collaborating and talking through it. And we have a letter of intent that Tim was talking about. And from the town's point of view, while it's not done, it's a letter of intent. It's a non-binding letter of intent. All the parties have agreed. Again, it's down to the lawyers to write the deal. So we're just waiting. So when the deal's ready, what this will do is it will mean the town is net positive groundwater. We would put more water back into groundwater storage than we're pumping out currently. It will mean the town is water secure for at least the next 2 generations. And it will mean that we have the ability to do larger watershed restorations that could have secondary benefits for fire mitigation. Is when you decrease the ladder fuels and the brush, you not only make it drink less water, but you make it less likely to burn. You can do massive system restoration if you have enough money to do it. We have to restore landscape scale restoration. So we have to go out and do several thousand acres of watershed in our community. And that sounds like a huge amount, but it starts with the little bites. We've done so far 50 acres. We're doing another 11 acres this year. When these deals are in place and when we can use that seed funding to do design and to apply for grants, hopefully it will escalate the number of grants. But we've already received around, it's about 10 grants for watershed restoration so far. We've applied for 13 and received 10. Some of them, the Water Resources wrote for us, 2 of them. Some we wrote. They were written for all gamut of things: invasive species reduction, fire mitigation, the pipeline for water restoration, the watershed management plan. And all of these things, they tie into a bigger vision for restoring the natural ecosystems of our community. And Superior has a long history of this sort of impact and mitigation. The now ghost town of Pinal, the old mining town from 1870, was the first electrically powered town in the state, and it was powered by steam generators from trees they cut in our region. So they denuded all the hills around us, all the trees in the valley, cut them all down, and burned them in these steam generators. Apparently, there used to be on the top of the Apache Loop, there used to be pine trees. There are none there now. So Boyce Thompson bought the mine, or his company bought the mine in the early 1900s, and he built the smelter. At the same time, he built the Boyce Thompson Arboretum. And he was going to do mining underground. He was going to be producing copper. At the same time, he was going to be doing ecosystem restoration and studies of desert ecosystems. It has 6 different desert ecosystems with the idea that they would produce food for more sustainable populations. And that sort of sustainable mining should be a model for us going forward. And it's the shared vision that we have, that we're not just going to produce a product, we're going to leave the world better than we found it. And working together and bringing the different resources of government and private sector together to do that, and the experts that the private sector can bring, means that that's actually a seeable goal. It's possible we could do that. A small town our size on its own, it had a vision, but it had no ability to get it done. We didn't have the resources. So that plan sat on a shelf for 30 years or 20 years.
And I do think that's such a good point about what happened here is the capacity building that you guys worked out by bringing in the Water Resources Research Center and consultants to the disposal of the town, because you have, what, a dozen people on staff to run a whole town? But yeah, you need those experts and additional people to get all this done. So that was a
Right.
great
And
thing
I
that you
think
guys did.
that we can learn from the past, and we've been coexisting, right? So mining and communities and nature can coexist, and they do today, and they can do it into the future as long as it's informed by good science, good technology, good information, and like you said, Todd, a willingness for both of us to be at the table and have those conversations over the life, which is the Good Neighbor Agreement, and intent is to do that. So hopefully this is an example of a new way of working together, and it really is a way that we do mining with communities as a co-design and together into the past.
Okay, well, I thank you very much for the participants on that. Just to check, I can't start my video, but since I can see you, Tim, can you hear me?
I can.
Good. And Vicky, thank you very much for being with us today. One question I had was, I don't know if it fits into something that's answerable, is that you talked about the various points that you wanted to establish in that Good Neighbor Agreement, or the outline of what you were talking about, and you mentioned a number of points. What can we talk a little bit about what specific points were addressed in water?
Vicky, you're on mute.
You're still on mute. There you go. And your sound is good. If you have an external speaker, sometimes that interrupts the sound.
It's been a day for technical problems. Perhaps I can answer it because I helped draft the agreement.
Yeah, thank you, Todd.
So the Good Neighbor Agreement by itself does not specifically call out much. I mean, it does mention a few things about water monitoring and things, but it's more a structure for communication and for making sure all parties stay at the table. The actual mitigation agreements for specific water mitigations are separate and standalone. So if there's a problem with them, they need to be adjusted. They can be brought to the Good Neighbor Agreement Relationship Committee to be discussed. The community working group can discuss any issues having to do with these other mitigation agreements, but the agreements themselves are between the town and the mine and have their own force and effect.
Okay, good. So basically, what you do is you set up a focal point for the resolution of problems. Is that
That's exactly what it is. It's a commitment to talk, and um, most good neighbor agreements are similar. I mean, you look at the Stillwater one, which is one of the ones we researched when we were looking to build our own good neighbor agreement, and it has a structure, and then it has a whole bunch of referenced agreements that are part of it. The actual structure is fairly short, but the referenced agreements are hundreds of pages. It's kind of similar here. People who are signatory to mitigation agreements, the resolution, will generally join the good neighbor agreement um, in order to be able to discuss them and to make sure that if there's a problem with them, something arises through either party not meeting their obligations, that we can talk about it and fix it.
would the idea be to eliminate the desert well field or to use the groundwater within the basin there at Magma or Pinal?
There's a big area. There's a lot that those are very complex issues. So let me preface that by saying nothing's done yet. So we're working with Arizona Water, who owns that system. It isn't a for-profit company that owns the system. So we have to support their operations and make sure that they support the towns and the mines. So it's kind of a three-party agreement. But the main concept we're looking at right now is doing a recharge system at the desert oil field. So get water from a sustainable surface water source, pipe it to the desert oil field, and then do a recharge basin there.
Good, good. Well, the Boyce Thompson Arboretum has been mentioned a couple times, and I think that this would be a good time to give them a promotion, just because those of you that haven't been up to the Boyce Thompson Arboretum, it is a magnificent place, and it's also a great place if you want to get some cactus. They also have a cactus sale place there.
And Boyce Thompson himself is a very interesting dude to look up if you're interested in interesting characters in our history. He was a visionary. He was a miner. He built cutting edge mining technology, and he was, a sustainable ecosystem and food system guy. And he built up infrastructure to research food sustainability in desert ecosystems. It's not just that the Arboretum, it has a sister organization at Cornell that does research in this area. So, very interesting cat who built the mine here, and we're trying to carry on his legacy and find his vision and carry it forward.
Yeah, and he also, I think, supported Cornell University with substantial endowments. Is anyone else would like to throw out some questions? Okay, Vicky, I'm sorry that we couldn't uh, get your audio working. It's one of the great mysteries of life is when we get into these technical glitches. Uh, Tim, do you have anything you'd like to add to the discussion here?
No, I think we've summed it up pretty well. I think it's been really neat to see the relationship between the town and the mine develop and move into collaboration to work on these issues, and I'm trying to do something that'll outlast the mine here. So I'm looking forward to seeing it move from letter of intent to finalization and actually executing some of this, and it'd be really great to someday soon see water in the creek.
Good, good. Well, I I noticed that, or you did comment that the idea would be to have meetings without the lawyers, and so that's the reason your agreement is 60 pages long there. That uh, without the lawyers, it'd probably be more like 15 pages.
It was 7 pages to start, actually.
Good, good. Actually, I see. Actually, I do have. There are a couple of questions in Q&A here. Let's see. Um, The first one was, what kind of groundwater regulations have been set in place to aid the project?
Um, Go ahead, Ted.
I was just going to say, we're in the Phoenix AMA, so all the Phoenix AMA rules apply. All the groundwater pumping has to be accounted for and purchased through a sustainable source, and there is no unaccounted for water in this calculation.
Yeah, I'd say the long-term storage credit piece of the mitigation that we're talking about, or kind of drinking water for the town, that'll all comply with AMA regulations.
Yeah, and that fits into another question that comes from my colleague Ana Bastida. It says, are there monitoring provisions on water quality and quantity in the Good Neighbor agreements?
Yeah, there's been a long-standing, and it actually predates the Good Neighbor Agreement. There's been an agreement with Community Working Group, which Vicky set up, I don't know, 7-8 years ago, or helped set up. And it brings all the community stakeholders together to discuss key issues. And they spend a lot of times on the tailings. They spend a lot of time on water, and it has a water monitoring group that goes around and monitors all the test wells in the region. So there's 3 or 4 wells they go out and they test on a regular basis to verify that the water quality impacts are not being felt there. And the mine pays for a separate contractor that reports to the community working group itself, which is the Good Neighbor Agreement now. And they cross-check and double-check the samples and verify that the water is clean and safe. So that's ongoing, and will go on for pretty much the life of the mine.
Good, thank you. Are there any other questions or comments from our speakers or participants? Okay, well, thank you very much, Todd and Vicky. We really appreciate your willingness to show how these things work. I think that the bottom line that I take away from it is it's more important to set up a working group to resolve the problems, to understand the problems, and then in good faith go about getting them resolved.